My people, perhaps the meeting of the century just happened. I'm talking about a meeting that could change the balance of power in Africa. The alliances shaping the next global order. The fate of a region caught between imperialism and independence. Because Africa's most defiant young leader, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, just walked into the Kremlin to meet face-to-face with Vladimir Putin. And no, this wasn't just any meeting. It happened barely a month after Traoré survived a coup attempt, one that many believe had Western fingerprints all over it. And guess what? Almost no one in the West is talking about it. But don't get it twisted. That doesn't mean they aren't watching. Because this wasn't just a diplomatic courtesy call. This was a power play, a signal, a shift. And it started long before the cameras rolled. According to reports, Putin sent a private Russian jet to personally fly Traoré from Ouagadougou, escorted by fighter jets across international airspace. That's not protocol. That's a message to the West, to Africa, to the world. This historic meeting took place as Russia marked 80 years since its victory over Nazi Germany, a moment thick with symbolism. The world watched tanks roll through Red Square. But no, don't be distracted by the flowers and flags. This wasn't a photo op. This was a summit of strategy. And today on The Breakdown, we're unpacking it all. What Putin and Traoré really discussed at this private meeting. The three biggest takeaways from their conversation that you need to know. And why this could reshape not just Burkina Faso, but the future of African resistance and global geopolitics. Because if Traoré succeeds in forging a new path with Russia, he won't just be the man who kicked out France. He'll be the one who rewrote the rules for Africa's future. And the question we need to ask is this: will Russia be the power Traoré needs to finish what he started? Or will this alliance come with a cost? We're about to break it all down. But first, a big welcome to all our new subscribers and members. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're watching and haven't joined us yet, please consider this your personal invitation. Here at Panagenius TV, we're not just building a channel. We're creating a global home for Black stories that are told with truth, intention, and power. And if that speaks to you, and I hope it does, hit subscribe, tap that bell, drop a super thanks, or join our membership community where we go beyond the headlines with exclusive content, behind the scenes conversations, and a front row seat to the dialogue shaping our future. Because this isn't just content, no, it's a movement. And I'd love for you to be a part of it. All right, now let's break it down. So to understand why this meeting between Putin and Traoré is so significant, you need to understand who Ibrahim Traoré is and what he represents. Of course, we've talked a lot about him here on this show. Traoré is not your typical African head of state. He's a 37-year-old former army captain who seized power in 2022 during Burkina Faso's second coup in under a year. He came to power promising to end terrorism, restore sovereignty, and free his country from neo-colonial control. And he meant it. Since then, he's kicked out French troops and shut down France's military bases, expelled Western media and aid agencies he believes are part of the problem, suspended the constitution and declared a transitional military government, aligned with Mali and Niger to form the Confederation of Sahel States, a new bloc of West African nations turning their backs on Western influence. His message? Africa cannot be free if it depends on the very powers that once colonized it. But Traoré hasn't just been making enemies in the West. No, he's been making strategic friends elsewhere. First it was Mali, then Niger. Now It's Russia. This meeting with Putin comes just weeks after he reportedly survived a coup attempt, with many suspecting foreign involvement. And now he's in Moscow, sitting across the table from Vladimir Putin. So when we say this isn't just a diplomatic meeting, it's because for Traoré, this could be the difference between revolution and removal. For Russia, it's a chance to lock in a new ally in the heart of West Africa, right where France and the US are losing ground. And for Africa, it's a turning point. Now let's pause for a moment and talk about how Ibrahim Traoré even got to Moscow, because that alone says more than most press releases ever will. According to multiple reports, Russia sent a private government jet to personally fly Traoré from Ouagadougou to Moscow. But that's not all. He was escorted by Russian fighter jets along the way. My people, that's not protocol. That's not some travel arrangement. That's a message. A message to Burkina Faso's enemies, foreign and domestic, that Traoré has powerful friends now. A message to the West that Russia is willing to defend its allies, even symbolically, with military might. And a message to the rest of Africa that a new kind of partnership is possible. One based not on lectures and conditions, but respect and force projection. In a world of geopolitics, how you arrive often says just as much as what you say when you get there. This wasn't a president quietly flying commercial or slipping in through the side door. This was a military-backed escort for a revolutionary leader arriving in Moscow as an honored guest of the Kremlin in the middle of global sanctions, wars, and a realignment of world power. It was a high-stakes show of alliance, loyalty, and defiance. And it tells us one thing. Putin is betting on Traoré. And Traoré is betting on Russia. Now, before we get into what was actually discussed at this meeting, let's take a moment to look at who was sitting across the table from Traoré. This wasn't just a casual photo op with Putin. No, the Kremlin rolled out its top brass, and that speaks volumes. On the Russian side, the meeting included Russia's longtime foreign minister and chief architect of its Africa strategy. Then the deputy prime minister, who is key to energy deals and trade negotiations. Then Putin's press secretary, signaling this meeting was meant for the world to see. Then Russia's brand new defense minister, at a time when military cooperation is front and center. And then you had the Minister of Economic Development, showing Russia is serious about trade and investment. And you had Putin's top foreign policy aide, known for managing Russia's highest level diplomatic channels. And then you had head of Russia's public health agency, pointing to interest in health cooperation. You also had the CEO of Rosatom, Russia's powerful nuclear energy agency. And then you had a key Kremlin strategist, an economic advisor. My people, that's not just a delegation. That's a war room. You had defense, foreign affairs, energy, education, public health, and nuclear power all represented. In other words, Russia's entire playbook for influence was in this room. Why does that matter? Because it means Russia sees Traoré and Burkina Faso not as a charity case, but as a strategic partner in a broader geopolitical realignment. They're not just looking to drop aid and bounce. They're trying to build a full spectrum alliance, military, economic, educational, and even nuclear. This wasn't a handshake. This was a negotiation table. And everyone who mattered in the Kremlin was there. So now that you know who was in the room, let's get into what they actually talked about. Now, I've reviewed the full transcript of the meeting, and while it's short, it's packed with signals, symbolism, and strategy. So let's begin with President Putin's remarks. He said, "Mr. President, friends, we are delighted to see you. Before we begin, I would like to thank you once again for your decision to take part in celebrations marking the 80th anniversary of victory in the Great Patriotic War. I remember our constructive and productive conversation when you first visited our country in 2023 to participate in the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg. Your current visit to Russia to attend celebrations of the 80th anniversary of victory is deeply symbolic and reflects the friendly nature of the Russia-Burkina Faso relations. I would also like to mention your country's contribution to defeating German Nazism and its satellites. About 30,000 people from modern-day Burkina Faso fought as part of the anti-Hitler coalition in the Free France formations led by the legendary son of the French people, General Charles de Gaulle." So let's stop here for a moment, because this opening wasn't just an introduction. It was a carefully layered narrative play designed to elevate Traoré, anchor Russia's role in Africa's future, and reframe the past to serve present ambitions. By tying this meeting to the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany, Putin was doing far more than celebrating history. He was staging a moment where the struggles of two nations, Russia and Burkina Faso, could be portrayed as parallel battles against oppression. But here's the real strategic twist. Putin doesn't just talk about his own legacy. He intentionally invokes Burkina Faso's colonial past, referencing the 30,000 soldiers from what is now Burkina Faso who fought in World War II under French command. Why does that matter? Because it allows Putin to reposition Burkina Faso from a former colony of France to a co-combatant in the fight against fascism. It reframes African soldiers who were long used as a cannon fodder for Europe's wars as freedom fighters in a shared global cause, not tools of empire, but agents of resistance. That alone is a powerful narrative reversal, but it's also a strategic one, because what Putin is really doing here is rewriting who the liberators are. He's saying the West may have colonized you, but Russia remembers your sacrifices. Russia sees you. In doing so, Putin isn't just appealing to Traoré's sense of history. He's offering something the West has consistently failed to give African leaders: dignity. And let's be clear, this is a man who knows how to weaponize symbolism. Hosting Traoré at an event so sacred to Russia's national identity wasn't just a gesture of respect. It was a geopolitical endorsement, a way to tell the world, this man is one of us now. At a time when Traoré is isolated from the West, accused of undemocratic rule, and fresh off surviving a coup attempt, this kind of international validation matters. Putin is giving Traoré exactly what Western institutions have denied him: legitimacy. So while the Western media barely covered this meeting, the message couldn't have been louder. It said, "We see you, we honor your history, and together, we are continuing the fight." A fight that may have once been against Nazi Germany, but today, it's against the forces of neocolonialism, sanctions, and foreign control. This is how Putin wins influence, not just through oil and arms, but through storytelling. And with this opening, he's inviting Traoré and the Sahel, by extension, into a shared narrative of global resistance. He continues, "Today, we are united by a common goal of fighting terrorism and extremism. We will continue to help the Republic in restoring the rule of law and constitutional order, and to assist in suppressing the radical groups that are still active in certain parts of Burkina Faso. Over the past 2 years, we have made significant progress in expanding mutually beneficial cooperation across various areas. In late 2023, after a pause that lasted over 30 years, the Russian embassy in Ouagadougou resumed its operations. A regular political dialogue was established. Even though bilateral trade remains modest, it is nonetheless on the rise, which is a promising trend that should, of course, be encouraged. We will work together to further strengthen economic ties and diversify mutual trade. The Burkina Faso Economic Days in Russia in October 2024, which were attended by a high-ranking Burkinabe delegation headed by the Prime Minister, were beneficial in this regard. Work is underway to create an intergovernmental commission. A dedicated working group was formed in late 2024. We will continue to help your country in training national personnel. The Russian government scholarship quota for Burkinabe citizens has been more than doubled for the year 2024 to 2025 academic year. This year, we are prepared to take 27 more students from your country. The tuition will be covered from Russia's federal budget. In all, about 3,500 students from Burkina Faso received their education in Russia. Cultural and humanitarian ties have been promoted since 2024 by the Ouagadougou-based Russia House, which offers Russian language classes, among others. Cooperation in healthcare and sanitation holds a lot of promise. On April 24th to 25th, Ms. Popova visited Ouagadougou. We are ready to carry out joint scientific research, develop laboratory infrastructure, and train specialists. We prioritize humanitarian aid to Burkina Faso as well. Last year, we shipped to your country 25,000 tons of wheat, free of charge. This month, a large shipment of other foods will arrive in Ouagadougou. We appreciate close coordination with Burkina Faso in the international arena, including at the United Nations and other international organizations. Consultations between Russia and the Confederation of Sahel states have become a valuable new cooperation format. The first such meeting took place at the level of foreign ministers in Moscow in April. I think our prospects are good across many areas. We have an opportunity to discuss some of them today. So, after opening with ceremony and historical reverence, Putin now gets down to business. And make no mistake, this section is his pitch, his offer, his blueprint for how Russia plans to replace the West as the primary partner for a rising generation of African leaders like Ibrahim Traoré. At its core, this portion of the speech outlines a full spectrum alliance, military, economic, educational, humanitarian, and yes, diplomatic. And each point serves a purpose. First, security first, positioning Russia as Burkina Faso's new military anchor. Putin begins by identifying a shared enemy, terrorism and extremism. That's deliberate. It allows Russia to step in as a stabilizing force without sounding imperial. He pledges to help Traoré restore the rule of law and suppress insurgent groups. But behind the language of peace and order lies the true offer: military partnership. Russia is positioning itself as the anti-French alternative, a foreign power that supports African sovereignty without judgment and without political strings. For a leader like Traoré, who just survived a suspected foreign-backed coup attempt, this is golden. Second, the reopening the embassy, sort of permanent presence. Putin notes the reopening of the Russian embassy in Ouagadougou after more than 30 years. This isn't just about consular services. It's about planting the flag. Embassies are strategic outposts. Reopening one in a country that kicked out France just months earlier is a loud message. We're here to stay. It's also a sign that Russia sees Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel as a key node in its expanding Africa strategy. Third, modest trade, bold intentions. Yes, trade is modest, but Putin's emphasis is not on the current numbers, it's on the momentum. This is classic Russian foreign policy playbook. Get in early, build ties through economic days, and join commissions, and over time, convert political loyalty into economic dependency. By forming an intergovernmental commission, Russia isn't just making deals. It's creating a pipeline for ongoing influence. 4, training the minds of tomorrow. The education section might sound like soft power fluff, but it's the real long game. Putin commits to doubling the scholarship quota for Burkinabe students, covering tuition from Russia's federal budget, expanding cultural programming through the Russia House in Ouagadougou. This is the battle for the next generation. The future technocrats, engineers, and policymakers of Burkina Faso will be trained not in Paris or Washington, but in Moscow. And when you train a country's elite, you shape how that country thinks, leads, and allies itself. 5, healthcare, research, and the science of influence. Putin mentions Russian cooperation in health and sanitation, visits from high-level Russian public health officials, joint scientific research, lab development. This is about optics and control. Where the West tends to send consultants and reports, Russia is offering tangible infrastructure, lab, research centers, boosts on the ground expertise. It wins hearts in headlines. 6, the wheat diplomacy. Russia's delivery of 25,000 tons of free wheat, with more on the way, is a masterstroke. This isn't aid. This is leverage. In a region where food insecurity drives unrest, Russia is now branding itself as the next provider of last resort, not just for Burkina Faso, but potentially for the entire Sahel bloc. It's Russia saying, we'll feed your people without lecturing your leaders. And that message lands powerfully in a post-France, post-aid, post-patronage world. And 7, a Sahel strategy, not just a Burkina deal. The final portion expands beyond Burkina Faso and speaks to the bigger game, the Confederation of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. Russia is already coordinating with them at the foreign minister level. This is not bilateral diplomacy. This is bloc building. Is Putin saying, we don't just want your country, we want your coalition. He's slowly constructing an African sphere of influence and doing it at a time when the West is distracted, fractured, and increasingly mistrusted in the region. Here's the bottom line. This isn't just a list of cooperation points. This is Russia's grand bargain with Africa's new revolutionaries. It says, we won't interfere in your politics. We'll help you build your army. We'll train your youth. We'll deliver your food. We'll elevate your leaders. And in return, you give us access, loyalty, and leverage in a region where the West is bleeding influence. This is Putin offering Traoré the one thing every revolutionary leader needs, a lifeline. And in doing so, he's not just shaping Burkina Faso's future, he's rewriting the global rules of engagement in Africa. Now let's turn to President Traoré's response. He said, "Good afternoon, comrade, President. Thank you very much. I am honored to be able to take part in the great victory celebrations. I would like to thank you for the invitation. It is very symbolic for us. I must say that during this visit, I learned a lot about the culture and history, which were the foundation of the resistance of the Russian people. I learned about the sacrifices made by your people, which made it a free nation today. I would like to thank you once again for inviting me. This particular moment and this meeting gives us a chance to think about what is happening now and to think ahead. Today's obstacles should not stop us. To some extent, these obstacles even play into our hands, because despite the sanctions that have been imposed against the Russian Federation by many countries, Russia occupies a prominent place in the international arena. and we take this into account, we understand that it is not easy. I watched soldiers marching in front of us. I saw the military equipment, including tanks that took part in the Great Patriotic War. And I saw modern equipment as well. We would like cooperation between us to develop exponentially and to take new forms. We thank you for your attitude towards Burkina Faso. Today, I visited the Mendeleev Institute, and we understand that in addition to defense and security, there is another important sphere, namely science and education. We would like Russia to help us educate our young people and teach them science so that we can develop our own production, industry, and engineering, because it is very important for Africa. We believe that the terrorism we are witnessing today comes from imperialism, and we are fighting it. If we put an end to this war, if we have a strong army, we will be able to engage in developing our homeland. This is what we see as the purpose of our struggle. This is why it is utterly important to build and train staff. Very often in Africa, there are a lot of expectations, a lot of needs in terms of equipment and hardware, which is why we have much to do. We would like to ask for help. And the main thing you can help us with is the transfer of technology and know-how. We need to understand how we can spread the universities that exist in Russia to Burkina Faso, how we can open university branches in Burkina Faso to train our citizens, our students in a more practical way. This is our fundamental objective. We would like Burkina Faso to develop and for many students to come to us and to study science. We see the wonderful youth of the Russian Federation. There are many young researchers among them, and we would like you to share your experience. In his short response, President Traoré didn't just respond to Putin's proposals. He reframed the stakes of the relationship entirely. While Putin presented Russia as a willing partner, Traoré came to the table with a clear and direct message. Burkina Faso doesn't just want support. It wants transformation, and it's ready to build it with or without the West. Traoré opens with reverence, thanking Putin for the invitation, acknowledging Russia's history, and drawing inspiration from the sacrifices of the Russian people. But this isn't flattery. It's strategic alignment. By praising Russia's resilience under pressure, especially in the face of sanctions, Traoré is signaling that Burkina Faso sees itself on a similar path, fighting for survival against imperial forces, both external and internal. When Traoré references Russia's military, its World War II era tanks and modern weapons, he isn't just admiring firepower. He's linking it to national dignity and developmental readiness. For him, security is not an end. It's the precondition for sovereignty and economic growth. He said, if we put an end to this war, if we have a strong army, we will be able to engage in developing our homeland. That's the blueprint. First, defeat imperialism and terror. Then build industry, education, and production. He's now romanticizing revolution. He's planning its second phase, economic independence. Then where many leaders might ask for aid, Traoré makes a different appeal. He talks about the Mendeleev Institute, about science, about building a skilled, technologically capable Africa. Traoré is laying out a long-term vision where African nations own their development pipelines through education, engineering, and homegrown expertise. He's saying to Russia, we don't want to borrow your solutions. We just want to learn how to build our own. And perhaps the most revolutionary part, he said, we need to understand how we can spread the universities that exist in Russia to Burkina Faso. This is a request for infrastructure, not charity. It's an ask for the foundation of intellectual sovereignty. And Traoré doesn't dance around the issue of imperialism. He calls it another form of terrorism. That is a direct ideological claim. He's not blaming poverty, religion, or local corruption. He's blaming imperialism. And then in the final stretch of his remarks, Traoré talks about students, young researchers, practical training, and university branches. It's not about weapons. It's not even about immediate wins. It's about laying the foundation for Burkina Faso and Africa to finally stand on its own. That's what makes this speech so radical. He's not positioning Burkina Faso as a victim looking for rescue. He's positioning it as a nation in transition, looking for partnerships that respect its right to build. In essence, Traoré is saying, we've broken the old chains. Now, help us forge new tools. The takeaway? Traoré didn't come to Moscow with his hand out. He came with a blueprint for what Africa could become if given the chance to define its own future. His speech wasn't emotional. No, it was visionary. It wasn't submissive. It was strategic. And it wasn't just about Burkina Faso either. It was a challenge to the entire continent. He's asking, what if we stopped outsourcing our security, our food, our knowledge, and our youth? What if we built it ourselves with partners who don't ask us to compromise our dignity to do it? And in that moment, in that room in Moscow, Traoré wasn't just speaking for Burkina Faso. He was speaking for every African nation looking to break free. So what does this all mean? Because what just happened in Moscow wasn't just a diplomatic visit. It was a geopolitical inflection point. It was a warning to the West and a signal to Africa. It was a blueprint for what post-colonial sovereignty could look like in the 21st century. This wasn't about one leader and one country. It was about a new alliance taking shape in real time. Let's break down what this moment truly means. First, the Sahel is becoming the epicenter of global realignment. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have already broken away from ECOWAS. They've rejected French military presence. They're building a confederation of their own. And now, with Russia stepping in as their top diplomatic and security partner, a new power axis is forming, not led by Washington, not backed by Paris, but by leaders who believe that sovereignty must come before democracy and independence before aid. This meeting makes it official. The Sahel is no longer neutral ground. It's contested territory in a new kind of Cold War. Two, Russia is offering what the West wants, which is respect without strings. Putin's speech made it clear. Russia is not asking questions about governance, elections, or human rights. Instead, it's offering military support, food, education, and training, and something deeper, validation. To many African leaders, especially those in transitional or military governments, that matters more than foreign aid or IMF loans, because the West comes with conditions, but Russia, they're coming with confidence. And three, Traoré just redefined what African leadership can sound like. Traoré's speech was one of the boldest we've seen from a modern African leader on the world stage. He didn't ask for charity. He demanded technology transfer, university partnerships, and intellectual infrastructure. He didn't play the victim. He named imperialism as the root of instability and asked for tools to dismantle it. And in doing so, he set a new tone for what African leadership in the 21st century can look like. Strategic, unapologetic, future-focused. 4, guys, a new map is being drawn, and Africa has a pen. For decades, Africa has been treated like a pawn in other people's games. In the colonial era, it was divided by force. In the Cold War, it was divided by ideology. In the neoliberal era, It was divided by debt and dependency. But this moment in Moscow shows us something else. Africa is beginning to choose its own alignments, based not on pressure, but on perceived partnership. And that terrifies the traditional powers. Because the question is no longer who controls Africa. It's becoming, who does Africa want to work with? And on what terms? So where do we go from here, my people? This meeting between Traoré and Putin could have historic implications, yes. Burkina Faso may be a small country, but this meeting sent a strong global message. Africa is no longer asking for a seat at the table. It's starting to build its own. So now I want to hear from you. Was this a bold step toward true African sovereignty? Or is Traoré playing a dangerous game with a global power that always plays to win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. You know I'm in there with you, and I can't wait to hear what you thought about this meeting and the conversation had. And if you found this episode insightful, make sure you hit subscribe, tap that bell, and consider joining our membership community where we go deeper beyond the headlines. That's it for today's show. Thanks for staying with me. Until next time, take care. Hey, you. Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.